To kind of go down the hamstring conversation here, what are some of the key objective measures you look at following a strain to assess readiness to return for both a field sport or maybe a track athlete?
Um, I mean, it's the runs themselves, right, to some degree, because you have a progression of volume, right? As you go through, you're trying to expand your volume every session a little bit. And then if you do a short to long approach, you're going to go, okay, we're going to run tens. So you know that if they only run 10, they're only going to hit a certain velocity. You go out 12 and a half, that's an extra step, 15, 17 and a half, 20. So every time you add a step or you go a little farther, the velocity will go up. So by virtue of the fact they're covering more velocity, you know that they're able to handle that stress, that higher velocity. So if you've gone through a progression where you go, first couple of days we're doing 10s, then we go up to 15, then we go up to 20, and we make it all the way up to 30, say for a wide receiver, if he's putting in volume at 30 yards, say he's doing 4 by 30 times 4, so that's 480 yards, and he's asymptomatic and everything looks good technically, it's probably a good bet that if you put him back in a practice or a game, he's going to be okay. Because one, the quality and the volume is higher than anything he'll do in a game or a practice, right? Because you just have to measure the velocity and look at how fast they run on the field. And if you look, there was every year they'll do like a next gen stat things in the NFL where they say these are the fastest 10 guys, right? And then so I'm watching it and they have the little ticker, so you see the speedometer go up. Guy gets the ball, speedometer goes up. Guess where he tops out usually? About 30. He travels about 30 yards. So he needs about 30 yards to get over 20 miles per hour. All right. So you know that in the game that he needs to do that. Does he need to do any sort of speed endurance work if he runs farther? Yeah, he could. But if you're doing 8:30s or 12:30s in practice every day or every other day, you now have a buffer of protection around what's going to happen on the field, because most of the volume on the field is slower, right? Because they don't have distance to run. So by virtue of the fact that they've done your workouts that everything's going to be fine, right? Assuming that they're asymptomatic and everything else checks out in terms of what you see visually, and maybe you do a couple of range of motion tests and all that. But usually I don't do that. If they can do the work, they can do the work, right? And that's why it's very simple. You don't need to really test beyond that, because, hey, we did 12 by 30 in sets of 4. And those are probably within 95% of your top velocity ever recorded. That's probably pretty good. If you can do 12 of those reps, you're not going to get 12 reps in a game. You might get 2 of those reps, and then everything else is submaximal. So, you're going to drop in things like deceleration, more acute deceleration and direction change as part of those workouts because of that co-contraction issue. Like if they jam hard on a step and try to cut, they're going to have a really strong hamstring involvement to support the knee. So you do some of that stuff too. But I would say the base work is, let's get up, like for linemen, let's get out to 15 yards. For running backs, maybe 20 to 30, receivers, 30 plus, special teams. And then once they can do that, it's almost like they've locked into a safe pattern where they know, like, okay, I can do it. Not a problem. I know how to get there. I know what technique I should use. And then they just auto-regulate in the game, and it's not a problem. Whereas if you say you did Nordics all the time for your rehab, like, oh, the Nord board says we're good, but you haven't done the running progression. Well, guess what? Your brain's not, switched on to what has to be done on the field there. So you get up to 30, you're like, oh, it feels odd. I've never been here. Right. And then you re-injure and you wonder why. So it's just very specific to what the demands of the game are going to be. And then it creates a reserve because you're typically going above and beyond. I would say it's similar in track, because you're not going to hit higher velocities, but certainly you're going to accumulate a lot of volume. And there's less. The good thing about track is there's less guesswork. Like you're not trying to evade people, and you're not standing on the sidelines and then jumping back in. And so in track, things usually work a lot smoother, even though you're hitting higher velocities. So I've had guys blow their hamstrings at max velocity at like 50 meters into a race, and we get them back in 14 days. So, but there, it kind of begets, a successful improvement, because if you've been doing all the sprint work with good technique and building up these qualities, as you guys know, if somebody's fit, they go into a rehab or they go into a surgery, they're going to come out better than somebody who's not fit. So it's the same thing. If they're fit in terms of their sprinting ability, if they get hurt, like assuming there was no egregious mechanical issue going into it, then they're going to come out of it really good as well, because they just have the hardware and the software to, put things back together really easily. So I think anybody who's done the program, they kind of know the drill. Like, will there be re-injuries? Yeah, there will be. But they just fall back into the program. And then for some reason, if it took them, say, 17 days the first time, the next time it'll take them 14 and then 12. And, it starts to narrow because they know what's expected of them. Right. And there's a lot more confidence around the program. Like, with the Bundesliga team, we had these guys. The initial guy took, 27 days, because the doctors were fighting us like, oh, what do you mean you're going to sprint them, right? The MRI shows this. Like, don't worry about it. Then the next guy was 21 days, and then the next guy was 14 days, because there's just confidence. Now the players see that guy did it. And then the first thing you're doing is running related stuff. You're not doing sorry, Anthony, shitty physio stuff in the clinic, right? Like, you're actually running really quickly. And so the player's like, oh, I can see when I'm going to be ready. Like, they start putting the dots together and they go, oh, okay, yeah, 14 days, I'll be back, right? My agent likes that. My girlfriend likes that. My fans on Instagram like that, right? So, and they would mention stuff like that, because we would put them in the game, and the guy would they'd say, we want to put you in for 45 minutes. He's like, no, I must start the second half because my fans are watching, right? Okay, well, we'll put you in for 60. Right. So he did 60 minutes, and then the next game he did 90 minutes. Whereas before they'd go 20, 30, 40, like over a whole bunch of games. So because they did the work, you can reinsert them into the game without some sort of weird taper or ramp. So it's very interesting. And they basically tracked everything with GPS, so you could see the volume accumulations over the RTP period, which was interesting. It's not incredibly accurate in terms of velocity, but it's better than nothing, right? I have numbers now, at least.
Sure. Cool. Are you